They found a rare giant German shepherd frozen in ice. Minutes later, something surprising happened. The cold wind howled across the remote Alaskan wilderness when a group of hikers stumbled upon something they never expected to see. The outline of a massive dog, its body trapped beneath layers of ice and snow. At first, they thought it was just another tragic story of an animal lost to the harsh winter. But as they drew closer, they realized this was no ordinary dog. It was a rare giant German shepherd, its form preserved as though time itself had stopped. The hikers had no idea that within minutes, everything they thought they knew about this discovery would be turned upside down. What followed was a story of resilience, loyalty, and a second chance that would leave everyone speechless. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more inspiring stories like this straight to you. The Alaskan wilderness was unforgiving that morning. The sun barely broke through the heavy gray clouds, and the air stung with a chill that cut straight through layers of clothing. Miles of snow stretched endlessly, silent except for the crunch of boots pressing into the frozen earth. Among the hikers was Ethan Parker, a wildlife photographer who had ventured out in search of elusive Arctic foxes. He carried his camera close to his chest, his breath turning to mist in the frigid air. Ethan wasn't alone. Two local guides, brothers named Caleb and Jonah, trudged ahead, their eyes trained on the landscape. They knew the terrain well, and they often teased Ethan for chasing ghost animals in conditions that most people wouldn't dare face. Still, they admired his determination. On that day, however, what they found was far more incredible than any fox. Jonah stopped suddenly, lifting his gloved hand. "There. Do you see that?" he called back. Ethan squinted, his vision catching a strange dark shape beneath the translucent surface of the ice. At first, it looked like nothing more than a shadow cast by a tree. But as the three men moved closer, the outline sharpened. It was unmistakably an animal, its body large, powerful, and strangely preserved. The head tilted slightly, the ears upright. Ethan's chest tightened. "It's a dog," he whispered, pressing his palm against the glassy surface of the ice. His words trembled in the cold air. Caleb shook his head in disbelief. "Not just any dog. Look at the size of it." Indeed, this was no ordinary shepherd. The creature's frame was enormous, even in its frozen state. Its paws were broad, its shoulders massive, and its muzzle strong, though softened by time beneath the ice. For a moment, all three men simply stood there, unable to process what they were seeing. It looked like a statue, frozen mid-step, as if caught between life and death. Ethan's photographer instinct kicked in. He raised his camera and began snapping photos, the shudder breaking the silence. Yet as he worked, unease grew in his gut. Something about the dog felt different. Its body wasn't stiff like he expected. Beneath the frozen layers, there was something almost lifelike in the sheen of its fur, as though it hadn't been trapped there for long. "This isn't centuries old," Ethan muttered. "It hasn't been here that long." Jonah crouched low, brushing away snow to reveal more of the creature's face. His eyes widened. "It looks like it's just sleeping." The word sent a chill down Ethan's spine. He leaned in closer, his breath fogging up against the surface of the ice. And then it happened, so subtle that he thought his mind was playing tricks on him. The dog's chest moved, just slightly, just enough to ripple against the icy prison around it. But Ethan saw it. His heart leapt into his throat. "Wait, did you see that?" he cried. Caleb frowned. "See what?" It breathed. "I swear it just breathed." Ethan pressed his hand harder to the ice, desperately searching for movement. Then, as if to answer, the dog's eyelid twitched. A flicker, a spark of life. All three men stumbled back in shock. "That's not possible," Jonah muttered, shaking his head. "That dog should be dead." But the evidence was right in front of them. Somehow, against all odds, the giant German shepherd was alive. Adrenaline surged through Ethan. "We have to get it out. Now!" The brothers exchanged uneasy glances. They were used to hunting trips and rescuing people who got lost in the snow. But this was different. Caleb stepped forward, pulling an axe from his pack. "If it's alive, The ice won't hold much longer. But if we're wrong, he didn't finish the thought. Ethan didn't care. He dropped his camera into the snow and grabbed a smaller pickaxe from Jonah's sled. Every strike against the ice sent shards flying, the sound echoing through the empty wilderness. Each blow was an act of desperation, of hope clawing against impossible odds. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the ice began to crack around the dog's frame. Caleb smashed one last blow, and water bubbled through the fissures. Ethan reached in, his glove soaking instantly, and felt the coarse, thick fur beneath his fingers. It was warmer than he expected. He's still warm. Ethan gasped, pulling harder. Together, the three men pried and hacked until the shepherd's massive body slid free from its frozen tomb. The dog collapsed onto the snow, its chest heaving with shallow, ragged breaths. For a moment, they all froze, watching in stunned silence. This wasn't just any German shepherd. Its sheer size, its unusual coloring, dark sable with streaks of silver across its back, and the scars etched into its body told a story none of them could yet understand. Then the shepherd coughed, water and ice spilling from his mouth, and let out a low, guttural whine. Ethan fell to his knees beside it. He's alive. Oh my God, he's really alive. The dog's eyes fluttered open, deep amber, sharp and piercing despite its weakened state. And in that moment, Ethan felt something electric pass between them. It wasn't just relief. It was recognition. But how could that be? He had never seen this dog before. Jonah looked around nervously. We can't stay out here with him like this. The cold will finish what the ice started. Caleb nodded. There's an outpost 3 miles south. We have to move now. The three men scrambled into action, wrapping the shepherd in blankets from the sled, their hands trembling as they secured him. The dog let out another low groan, his eyes locked on Ethan as though trying to tell him something. And deep down, Ethan knew this was no ordinary rescue. This shepherd wasn't just a survivor of the ice. He carried secrets, scars, and a past that could change everything. As they began the treacherous journey south, snow whipping at their faces, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that he hadn't just saved a dog's life. Somehow, this rare giant German shepherd was about to save his. And what awaited them at the outpost would prove more shocking than anything they could have imagined. The snowstorm grew heavier as Ethan, Caleb, and Jonah struggled through the wilderness, pulling the sled where the massive shepherd lay wrapped in blankets. The dog's shallow breaths filled the silence, each rise and fall of his chest a reminder that they were racing against time. Ethan glanced back every few steps, terrified he would see the shepherd's body go still. Faster! Ethan urged, his voice raw from the cold air. His legs burned, but adrenaline carried him forward. By the time they reached the outpost, a wooden cabin used by hunters and rangers during long patrols, Ethan's fingers were numb, his beard stiff with ice. Caleb pushed the door open, and warm air rushed out to greet them. A fire had been burning in the hearth, left by rangers who had passed through earlier. The sudden heat felt like salvation. They carried the shepherd inside, laying him gently on a thick bearskin rug near the flames. Ethan tore off his gloves and touched the dog's chest, feeling the faint but steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Relief washed over him. Get the blankets, Ethan said urgently. Jonah fetched wool blankets from a trunk, while Caleb set a kettle of snowmelt over the fire. Ethan rubbed the shepherd's fur vigorously, trying to stir circulation back into its limbs. Slowly, the dog began to stir. His powerful body twitched, his paws flexing as though he were running in a dream. Then, with a groan that echoed deep in his throat, he opened his eyes. Ethan froze, caught in the glow of those amber eyes. They weren't wild or confused. They were searching, intelligent, and almost familiar. "You're safe," Ethan whispered, though he knew the dog couldn't understand the words. Still, the shepherd's gaze locked onto him, steady and unwavering. Jonah crouched nearby. This isn't just some lost pet. Look at him. His scars, his eyes. This dog's been through something. Ethan nodded. The shepherd's massive frame bore signs of a life hard-lived. Long scars across his flank, a healed notch on his ear, and the way his muscles rippled even under the stress of near death. This was no ordinary German shepherd. The shepherd coughed, water and ice trickling from his jaws. Caleb rushed with a bowl of warm water, holding it near the dog's mouth. Ethan dipped his fingers in, then brushed the moisture over the shepherd's lips. The animal licked weakly, his tongue rough against Ethan's hand. "That's it," Ethan murmured. "Stay with me. You got fight left in you." For hours, they tended to the shepherd, feeding him bits of dried meat softened in water, rubbing warmth back into his body, and whispering encouragement. Outside, the storm raged, but inside, a strange silence settled, one filled only with the crackle of the fire and the sound of the shepherd's slow recovery. It was well after midnight when the first true spark of life returned. The shepherd, his breathing now stronger, lifted his massive head. His gaze swept the room, then landed back on Ethan. With effort, he shifted his weight and attempted to rise. "No, no, don't push yourself," Ethan said quickly, pressing a hand to his side. But the shepherd didn't resist. He wanted to stand, and though his legs trembled, he managed it, towering over Ethan even in his weakened state. Jonah stepped back in awe. "He's enormous. I've never seen a shepherd this size." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "This isn't just any shepherd. This looks like AK-9, maybe military." The thought hit Ethan like a blow. Military dogs were trained, disciplined, and loyal beyond comprehension. If this was one, then he wasn't just lost, he was abandoned, or worse, left behind. The shepherd suddenly staggered, nearly collapsing, but Ethan caught him by the chest, guiding him back to the rug. The dog pressed his head briefly against Ethan's shoulder, as though acknowledging his help. That small gesture sent a jolt through Ethan's heart. It wasn't just gratitude. It was connection. The next morning, the storm had quieted. Pale light filtered through frost-coated windows. Ethan sat by the shepherd's side, his notebook open, sketching the dog's powerful form. Caleb brewed coffee, while Jonah checked supplies. The shepherd, stronger now, lay with his head resting on his paws. His amber eyes never left Ethan. When Ethan reached out to touch him, the dog didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned into the contact, a soft rumble rising from his chest, a sound more like trust than warning. "I think he likes you," Jonah said with a smirk. Ethan chuckled softly, scratching behind the shepherd's ear. "He's not just surviving. He wants to belong." But questions lingered in the air. Who was this dog? How had he ended up frozen in ice, alive against all odds? And why did Ethan feel this undeniable pull toward him? As if to answer, the shepherd suddenly rose to his feet again. He walked unsteadily toward the door, his claws clicking against the wooden floor. He stopped, growled low, and fixed his gaze on the snowy horizon beyond the glass. Caleb frowned. "What's he looking at?" Ethan stood beside him, peering out. Nothing but endless white stretched outside, but the shepherd's body was tense, ears erect. His instincts were speaking louder than anything their human eyes could see. "Something's out there," Ethan whispered. The shepherd turned back, locking eyes with him once more. And in that moment, Ethan knew this wasn't just a story of rescuing a dog. This was the beginning of something much larger. The shepherd carried secrets buried in ice and scars that whispered of battles fought. And whatever had nearly claimed him out there in the wilderness wasn't finished yet. The morning after the storm, the world outside the outpost looked deceptively peaceful. The trees stood heavy with snow, their branches bending under the weight, and the sky stretched clear and pale, like frosted glass. Ethan stood at the window, his camera hanging forgotten at his side. His eyes weren't on the scenery. They were on the shepherd. The giant dog paced slowly around the cabin, his paws heavy but sure. His strength was returning quicker than any of them had expected. Yet it wasn't his recovery that had Ethan's chest tight with unease. It was the way the shepherd moved, alert, purposeful, as though every sound outside carried meaning. "He's not just looking," Ethan murmured. "He's searching." Jonah, pouring hot coffee into tin mugs, raised a brow. "Searching for what?" Ethan didn't answer. He didn't know. The shepherd paused at the door again, muscles rippling beneath his sable and silver coat. His amber eyes locked on the snowdrifts beyond, unblinking. Then, without warning, he growled. A deep, guttural sound that reverberated through the small cabin. Caleb set his cup down sharply. "That's not random. He senses something." The three men exchanged wary glances. Out here, miles from the nearest settlement, Something could mean a lot of things: wild animals, shifting ice, or worse. Ethan knelt beside the shepherd, resting a cautious hand on his back. "What is it, boy? What are you telling us?" The shepherd didn't break his gaze from the horizon. His tail flicked once, slow and deliberate, like a signal. Ethan felt his throat tighten. It wasn't just instinct. It was training. Jonah spoke what Ethan had already begun to realize. "That dog's a K9. I'd bet my life on it." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Then the real question is, where's his handler?" The cabin grew heavier with silence. By midday, the shepherd had grown restless. He scratched at the door, low whines rumbling from his throat. Ethan hesitated only briefly before pulling on his parka. "He wants us to follow. And I think we should." Jonah cursed under his breath. "Ethan, this isn't a good idea. We're in the middle of nowhere. If that dog drags us into trouble." Trouble already found him. Ethan cut in. His eyes burned with determination. "We saved his life. Now we owe it to him to find out why he was out there." Reluctantly, the brothers agreed. They strapped on snowshoes, loaded supplies onto the sled, and stepped back into the frozen world. The shepherd led them, bounding through snowbanks with surprising strength for an animal that had nearly died the day before. The hike was grueling. The cold gnawed at their faces, and the snow crunched like glass beneath their feet. The shepherd tried ahead, pausing only to glance back, ensuring they kept pace. His eyes gleamed with purpose. After an hour, they reached a ridge overlooking a frozen valley. The wind howled across it, carrying with it an eerie stillness. Ethan scanned the horizon through his camera lens, searching for what the shepherd had sensed. At first, there was nothing but white. Then his breath caught. Tracks, faint but undeniable. Dozens of them, pressed deep into the snow. Not paw prints, boot prints, leading toward the valley center. "People," Ethan whispered. Jonah's face paled. "No one comes out here without a reason." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "And not good ones." The shepherd growled again, his ears pressed forward. He bolted down the ridge, ignoring Ethan's calls, following trail with single-minded intensity. Ethan's heart hammered as he chased after him, stumbling in the deep snow. At the base of the valley, the truth emerged. A camp, half buried under snowdrifts, but still intact. Tents, supplies, and Ethan's stomach twisted military-grade equipment. Radios, crates marked with faded stencils, and in the center, a fire pit long since extinguished. "What the hell is this?" Jonah muttered, kicking at a half-frozen ration pack. Ethan didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the shepherd, who had stopped in front of one tent. The dog's body stiffened, his nose pressed against the canvas. Slowly, he began pawing at it. Ethan rushed forward, pulling the flap open. Inside, he froze. A dog crate, empty but unmistakable. The bars bent as though something had fought desperately to get out, and scrawled across the metal in deep gouges were claw marks, matching the shepherd's size. Caleb stepped inside, his voice low. He was kept here. Ethan's chest clenched. He turned to the shepherd, who stood at the entrance, watching him. For the first time since they pulled him from the ice, Ethan saw pain in those amber eyes. Not just physical pain, but memory. This wasn't an accident, Ethan whispered. He didn't get trapped in the ice by chance. Someone left him. Jonah swore. But why freeze a dog alive? What kind of... He stopped, his eyes widening as the truth struck. Unless he wasn't supposed to survive. The shepherd let out a low whine, then stepped into the tent. He sniffed the crate, then turned abruptly and pushed his muzzle against Ethan's hand, urging him, begging him to understand. Ethan crouched, pressing his forehead gently to the dog's. "We'll find out who did this. I promise." Suddenly, a sound split the silence. A distant echo, sharp and mechanical. A gunshot. Caleb grabbed Ethan's shoulder, dragging him down. "Get low." That wasn't an echo. That was close. The shepherd bristled, hackles rising, his body angled toward the ridge, teeth bared. Whoever had abandoned him wasn't gone. They were still out there, watching. Ethan's blood ran cold. He knew then that saving the shepherd hadn't just pulled him into a mystery. It had pulled them into a war. And this dog, scarred and frozen but unbroken, was a key to it all. The valley that seemed so silent now pulsed with menace. The single gunshot echoed in Ethan's chest long after it faded into the frozen hills. The shepherd stood rigid, his amber eyes locked on the ridge where the sound had come from, his muscles taut like a coiled spring. "Someone's out there," Caleb whispered, his hand tightening on the rifle slung over his shoulder. Jonah shook his head in disbelief. "We're miles from civilization. Who would be here?" Ethan's gaze shifted from the snow-covered camp to the shepherd's scars, the bent crate, and finally to the dog's burning eyes. "Whoever left him here," he said grimly, "and I don't think they wanted him found." The shepherd barked once, sharp, commanding, a sound that rattled the air like a signal. He bounded toward the ridge, snow flying from his massive paws. Ethan bolted after him without thinking, adrenaline propelling him through drifts that clutched at his legs. "Ethan, wait!" Caleb called, but Ethan couldn't stop. The shepherd moved with uncanny precision, weaving across the valley floor toward a cluster of rocks. He halted suddenly, his body lowered, tail stiff, ears pinned forward. Ethan skidded to a stop beside him, crouching low. At first, he saw nothing but the glare of snow. Then, a flicker of movement, a shadow slipping behind a boulder. "Down!" Ethan hissed. A second shot cracked, kicking up snow inches from where they crouched. His heart pounded in his throat. Caleb and Jonah scrambled into position, weapons raised. "We're pinned," Caleb growled. The shepherd snarled, his lips peeling back to reveal teeth as white as the snow around them. He lunged forward, but Ethan caught his fur. "Not yet, boy. We don't know what we're dealing with." Another sound broke the air, not gunfire this time, but a voice. Harsh, distorted, carried on the wind. "Leave the dog." Ethan's breath caught. Whoever was up there didn't want them dead. Not yet. They wanted the shepherd. Jonah cursed. "They're after him. He's the reason all this gear is out here." But why? What could be so important about a dog? The shepherd pressed against Ethan, his eyes flashing with something between defiance and recognition. He knew that voice. His trembling frame told Ethan this wasn't just fear, it was memory. Ethan's fists clenched. "I don't care who they are. He's not going back to them." Caleb's jaw hardened. "Then we fight our way out." They crawled back toward the camp, snow biting into their skin. The shepherd stayed pressed against Ethan's side, his massive frame shielding him more than once from the bitter wind. By the time they regrouped at the tents, the silence had returned, heavy and suffocating. No more shots, no more voices, but the threat lingered. Whoever was out there was waiting. Caleb leaned close. "We can't stay here. Too exposed." Jonah pointed toward the east ridge. "There's a frozen riverbed that leads out of the valley. If we move fast, we can lose in the trees." Ethan's gaze fell to the shepherd, who stood tall despite his weariness. "Can you do it, boy?" he asked softly. The shepherd pressed his muzzle briefly into Ethan's palm, answering with trust. They moved quickly, breaking down their gear and pulling the sled into the riverbed. The snow muffled their steps, but every crack of ice beneath their boots made Ethan flinch. The valley felt alive with eyes. Halfway through the riverbed, the shepherd suddenly halted, his body stiffened, ears twitching. Then, with a sudden bark, he shoved Ethan sideways just as another shot rang out. The bullet splintered the ice where Ethan had been standing. "Move!" Caleb shouted, firing blindly toward the ridge. The crack of his rifle echoed back, but there was no cry of pain, no sign of the shooter. Ethan scrambled to his feet, his heart thundering. He looked at the shepherd, who stood defiantly in the open, his body shielding Ethan again. It wasn't just instinct. This was training, military-grade protection drilled into him. They trained him to take bullets for his handler, Ethan whispered, horror and awe mixing in his voice. Jonah pulled him forward. "Then we'd better act like his handlers and get him out alive." They ran, slipping and sliding through the riverbed until the trees swallowed them. The forest closed in, branches creaking under the weight of snow, muffling the sounds of pursuit. Finally, they stopped to catch their breath. Ethan collapsed against a tree, his chest heaving. The shepherd pressed against him, his warmth seeping through Ethan's frozen coat. Caleb scanned the woods, his face pale. Whoever they are, they'll track us. They won't stop. Ethan stroked the shepherd's thick fur, his fingers tangling in scars and ice-matted hair. Then neither will we. We'll find out who he really is. And we'll make sure they never touch him again. The shepherd licked Ethan's hand once, a gesture so simple yet filled with a depth that tightened Ethan's throat. In that moment, the man and the dog sealed an unspoken pact. But even as Ethan drew strength from the shepherd's loyalty, a chilling realization crept into his mind. Whoever had trained this dog, whoever had abandoned him in the ice, was still close, still hunting. And the truth about why they wanted him back was something darker than Ethan was ready to face. Somewhere beyond the trees, a radio crackled faintly, carried by the wind. A man's voice barked orders Ethan couldn't make out, but one word carried clearly through static. Recover. The shepherd's ears twitched, his body stiffening. He knew that word, and his trembling told Ethan everything. This wasn't just survival. This was war. The forest was quiet, but it wasn't peace. It was the silence of predators circling. Ethan, Caleb, and Jonah crouched low in the trees, the fire of exhaustion in their muscles, the cold sinking deep into their bones. The shepherd stood in front of them, his amber eyes scanning the darkness as though he could see what they could not. His breath puffed out in steady bursts, the sound strangely common to Ethan. For days now, they had been running. Each night, whispers in the snow. Each day, shadows on the ridges. Whoever hunted them was disciplined, ruthless, and unwilling to give up until the shepherd was back in their hands. And now, with supplies dwindling and exhaustion claw at their minds, Ethan knew there was no more running. They'll close, and by dawn, Caleb muttered, clutching his rifle. If we're going to make a stand, it has to be here. Jonah glanced at the shepherd, who stood unwavering despite his injuries. You think he knows it too? Ethan nodded. He didn't just think it. He felt it. The shepherd had been bred and trained for moments like this, when courage outweighed fear and loyalty demanded sacrifice. The night stretched long, the wind whispering through skeletal branches. Ethan sat with the shepherd, his hand resting gently on the thick sable fur. I don't know who they are, he whispered, or what they did to you, but I promise this is tonight. The shepherd pressed his massive head against Ethan's chest, as if sealing the vow. The attack came just before dawn. The first sign was a crackle of radios, faint but deliberate. Then, the crunch of boots in the snow. Ethan's heart raced, every nerve in his body screaming. Caleb and Jonah slipped into position, their rifles trained on the tree-lean. The shepherd moved first, stepping forward, his body rigid and prepared. His growl cut through the morning silence, low and threatening. Then the figures emerged, men in dark winter gear, weapons slung across their chests, their movements synchronized like soldiers. Ethan counted 6, maybe more still hidden. Their leader stepped ahead, his voice sharp and cold. Hand over the dog. No one else needs to get hurt. Ethan's fists clenched. He's not yours anymore. The shepherd barked, the sound deafening, defiant. The men flinched but didn't retreat. Last warning. The leader snapped. The forest exploded with chaos. Gunfire cracked. Snow sprayed, and the air filled with the acrid bite of smoke. Ethan dug behind a fallen log, pulling Jonah down with him. Caleb fired back, each shot precise, echoing through the trees. And in the center of it all, the shepherd charged. His massive frame tore through snowdrifts, his teeth bared, his roar more terrifying than any bullet. He leapt onto the first soldier, dragging him down in a whirlwind of fur and fury. Another soldier swung his rifle, but the shepherd was faster, snapping, striking, moving with the brutal grace of a warrior born. Ethan's heart twisted between fear and awe. This wasn't just an animal fighting. This was a soldier reclaiming his purpose. But there were too many. Ethan! Jonah shouted, firing into the shadows. They're circling us. Ethan raised his own rifle, his shots wild but desperate. He could barely hear over the thunder of his heartbeat, the bark of weapons and the shepherd's growls. Snow flew in violent bursts as the battle raged. Then Ethan saw it, one of the soldiers leveling his weapon at the shepherd's exposed side. No! Ethan screamed. He lunged, firing instinctively. The soldier fell, but not before the shot rang out. The shepherd staggered, a cry tearing from his throat as crimson stained the snow beneath him. Ethan's chest cracked open with anguish. "No, no, no, stay with me." But the shepherd didn't fall. He turned, blood streaking his thick fur, and launched himself once more at the leader. His jaws clamped down on the man's arm, wrenching the rifle away, forcing the soldier to the ground. The fight ended as quickly as it had begun. The surviving soldiers retreated, dragging their wounded with them, their leader screaming in rage as the shepherd released him and stood, towering, his chest heaving. Silence returned to the forest. Ethan dropped to his knees beside the shepherd, his hands frantic against the wound. "Stay with me, boy. You can't leave me now. Not after all this." His voice cracked, tears blurring his vision. The shepherd licked his hand once, weak but deliberate. His amber eyes locked onto Ethan's, filled not with fear, but with something Ethan understood instantly: faith. Jonah pressed snow against the wound, Caleb tearing fabric for a bandage. They worked desperately, refusing to let this creature slip away after everything he had endured. Finally, after endless minutes, the bleeding slowed. The shepherd collapsed into Ethan's lap, his breath shallow but steady. "You did it," Ethan whispered, his forehead pressed against the dog's. "You saved us. You saved yourself." The shepherd let out a soft rumble, almost a purr, before closing his eyes, not in surrender, but in rest. Weeks later, the shepherd stood once more, scarred, limping slightly but alive. Ethan had refused to leave his side to recovery, and in return, the shepherd had given him something no camera, no photograph could capture: trust. They left Alaska together. The shepherd no longer a ghost trapped in ice, but a living testament to resilience. He became Ethan's shadow, his protector, his friend. And though the mysteries of his past remained, what unit he belonged to, who had betrayed him, why they had tried to erase him, the shepherd no longer belonged to the darkness. He belonged to Ethan. As they walked side by side to the quiet streets of Ethan's hometown months later, people stopped to stare at the massive German shepherd, awe and admiration in their eyes. But for Ethan, there was only gratitude. Gratitude for the moment he had pressed his hand against the ice and seen life staring back at him. He looked down at the dog, smiling through the memory of fire and snow. "You're not frozen anymore. You're free." The shepherd looked up, amber eyes gleaming in the morning light, and for the first time, Ethan swore he saw him smile back. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Share it with someone who loves inspiring stories, and help us spread messages of courage, resilience, and hope.